I reincarnated as the villainous fiancé, but my fiancé's uncle was a much better option. Veronica opened her eyes and immediately regretted it. A crystal chandelier hung above her head. The bed beneath her was softer than anything she had ever slept on. The room looked larger than her entire apartment. What? She sat up abruptly and nearly fell off the bed. The last thing she remembered was returning home from work after a long day. She had eaten instant noodles, opened her favorite novel, and fallen asleep while reading. So why was she here? Veronica stared at her hands. They were pale, elegant, not hers. A strange feeling settled in her chest. She rushed toward the nearest mirror. The moment she saw her reflection, her legs almost gave out. Long black hair, pink eyes, porcelain skin, a face so beautiful it looked unreal. No way! Her voice shook. No. She knew this face. She had spent weeks reading about this woman, Veronica Van Beth, the villainous fiancée from the novel she had recently finished. The same villainess who spent years chasing after the male lead. The same villainess who got publicly humiliated. The same villainess who got dumped. The same villainess everyone hated. And the same villainess whose ending made Veronica throw her phone onto her bed in frustration. Are you kidding me? She grabbed the dressing table for support. Out of all people. Why this woman? A knock sounded at the door. Before Veronica could respond, a cheerful girl stepped inside. Good morning, sister. Veronica froze. Pink strawberry blonde hair, bright smile, warm green eyes. Ariane Van Beth, the original female lead. The heroine, the person Veronica had expected to become her enemy. Instead, Ariane rushed over and wrapped her in a hug. I was worried when you didn't come down for breakfast. Veronica blinked. Once. Twice. Wait, why was the heroine hugging the villainess? Sister. Ariane tilted her head. Are you feeling sick? Veronica stared. The novel never mentioned this. The sisters were supposed to dislike each other. Yet Ariane looked genuinely concerned. Before Veronica could answer, another voice came from outside. Ariane, stop smothering your sister. A tall young man entered. Julius Van Beth, Veronica's older brother. The man immediately frowned. You look pale. Veronica nearly fainted. Another loving family member. Another detail the novel conveniently ignored. Julius placed a hand against her forehead. No fever. Ariane crossed her arms. Maybe she's tired. Veronica could only stare at them. The villainess had a loving family? What kind of plot twist was this? A few minutes later, she found herself sitting at the breakfast table. Valeria and Louis Van Beth greeted her warmly. No hostility, no favoritism, no neglect. The entire family genuinely loved Veronica. By the time breakfast ended, Veronica had reached a conclusion. The original novel was trash. Absolute trash. Because if she had a family like this, why would she waste her life chasing David Smith? David Smith, the male lead, the handsome playboy who changed girlfriends like clothes, the man Veronica had spent years pursuing, the man who eventually dumped her, the man responsible for half the drama in the novel. Veronica immediately made a life-changing decision. I don't want him anymore. Simple. Easy. Effective. No chasing. No begging. No humiliation. No heartbreak. She would enjoy her second life. Focus on her family. Avoid the plot. And live peacefully. Unfortunately, the plot had other ideas. That afternoon, her phone buzzed. David Smith. Calling. Veronica stared at the screen. The original Veronica would have answered within a second. The new Veronica rejected the call. Then blocked the number. Silence. Peace. Freedom. Veronica smiled. This life is going to be amazing. Meanwhile, several kilometers away, David Smith stared at his phone. Call rejected. He frowned. That had never happened before. He called again. Blocked. David blinked. Then laughed. Playing hard to get. Surely that was it. After all, Veronica Van Beth had spent years chasing him. There was no way she could suddenly stop. Right. Unfortunately for David, for the first time in his life, he was completely wrong. And neither of them knew that a charity gala scheduled for next week was about to change everything. Because that night, a certain man had just returned from overseas, a man known throughout the business world, a man feared by competitors, a man who would unknowingly destroy David's confidence. Julian Valentine. And soon, he was going to meet Veronica Van Beth. For the first time, the following week passed surprisingly peacefully. No sudden attacks from the plot, no dramatic confrontations, and most importantly, no David. Veronica had spent the past 7 days enjoying the company of her family. She had gone shopping with Ariane, helped Valeria choose decorations for an upcoming family event, watched Julius interrogate a delivery driver because he looked suspicious. The delivery driver had simply been doing his job, yet Julius remained unconvinced. Veronica was beginning to understand why Ariane found him so entertaining. Unfortunately, the piece ended the moment Valeria entered Veronica's room on Saturday morning. "You're attending the gala tonight." Veronica immediately buried herself under her blanket. "No." Valeria smiled. "Yes." "No." "Yes." Veronica groaned. She already knew which gala this was. The charity gala, the exact event where several important scenes from the original novel had taken place, including one particularly humiliating moment involving David. The original Veronica had spent the entire evening following him around. David had spent the entire evening ignoring her. Veronica still remembered wanting to throw her phone after reading it. "I don't want to go." Valeria sat beside her. "You've spent all week indoors." "I like indoors." "You need fresh air." "I can open a window." Valeria laughed. Ariane suddenly appeared in the doorway. "Mother is right." "Traitor." Veronica narrowed her eyes. Ariane simply smiled. "You'll have fun." "No, I won't." "You might." "I definitely won't." "You don't know that." "I do know that." "Julian." "Wonderful." "Absolutely wonderful." Veronica considered jumping through a nearby window. Unfortunately, they were on the 3rd floor. Before she could escape, Eliza Smith smiled warmly. "Veronica, dear." Unlike her son, Eliza had always adored Veronica. Even in the original novel, Veronica returned the smile. "It's good to see you." Eliza immediately took her hands. "My goodness, you're even more beautiful than the last time I saw you." David appeared beside his mother. For some reason, that irritated him. A lot. Meanwhile, Violetta Valentine noticed the interaction. Her gaze drifted toward Veronica, then toward Julian, then back toward Veronica. A dangerous sparkle entered her eyes. Mothers were terrifying, no matter what universe you lived in. "Veronica!" Violetta smiled. "It's lovely to finally meet you." "The pleasure is mine." Veronica replied politely. Everything was going well. Everything was calm. Everything was normal. Then Louis spoke. "Julian." Veronica's soul left her body. "Why don't you introduce yourself properly?" "Traitor." Her own father was a traitor. Julian stepped forward. Up close, he was somehow even more handsome. This was deeply unfortunate. "Julian Valentine." His voice was calm, warm, pleasant. Veronica hated how nice his voice was. "Veronica Van Beth." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Julian glanced around the ballroom. "You seem uncomfortable." Veronica blinked. That was not what she expected. Most people commented on her appearance, or her family, or her engagement, not her discomfort. "A little." Julian nodded. "I understand." And somehow, he actually sounded sincere. Veronica stared. Was this man real? Meanwhile, David stared too. And the longer he watched, the more uncomfortable he became. Something felt strange. Veronica looked relaxed, comfortable, interested. She had never looked at him that way. Not once. The realization irritated him more than it should have. A lot more. Several minutes later, the conversation naturally split into smaller groups. Executives discussed business. Parents discussed family matters. David attempted to insert himself beside Veronica, only for Ariane to casually appear between them, like a guardian angel. A very petty guardian angel. David frowned. "Ariane." "David, I wanted to speak with Veronica." Ariane smiled sweetly. "I'm speaking with her." Veronica nearly laughed. David's eye twitched. Across the room, Julian witnessed the entire interaction. And for the first time that evening, he laughed. A small laugh, barely noticeable, but enough for Veronica to hear. Their eyes met again. And this time, she found herself smiling. A genuine smile. One she hadn't planned. Julian paused. For a brief moment, neither looked away. And somewhere nearby, Ariane silently celebrated, because she had already decided Julian Valentine was infinitely better than David Smith, and she intended to be proven right. Unfortunately for David, the evening continued getting worse. Veronica had escaped one conversation, only to find herself trapped in another. At least this time the company was pleasant. Julian stood beside her near one of the balcony entrances. The noise of the ballroom was quieter here. Much quieter. "Do you attend events often?" Julian asked. Veronica immediately answered, "No." The response was so fast that Julian almost laughed. "That bad?" "Much worse." Veronica glanced toward the crowd. "There are too many people. I thought people enjoyed networking." "They do. And you don't." "I'd rather be at home." Julian nodded thoughtfully. "Reading." Veronica froze. "How did you know?" "You seem like someone who reads." Veronica narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean?" Julian looked completely serious. "I'm not entirely sure." For the first time that evening, Veronica laughed. A real laugh. Not a polite one. Not a forced one. A genuine laugh. Julian found himself smiling too. Meanwhile, David had been searching for Veronica for almost 15 minutes. Not because he cared. Obviously, he was simply curious. Very curious. Extremely curious. When he finally spotted her standing beside Julian, his mood immediately worsened. The two looked surprisingly comfortable together. Too comfortable. David approached. Unfortunately, the moment he arrived, Damien Smith noticed him. "David!" David stopped. "Yes." Damien glanced toward Julian. "Your uncle was asking about the expansion project." The word echoed through David's soul. "Uncle." Veronica blinked. Wait, he actually had to say it? Out loud? This was amazing. David clearly noticed the amusement in her eyes. His suffering increased. Unfortunately, there was no escape. Julian turned toward him. "David!" There it was. The moment of truth. David forced a smile. "Uncle!" Veronica immediately looked away. She was trying very hard not to laugh. Very hard. Unfortunately, Ariane appeared from absolutely nowhere. Like she had sensed an opportunity. "Sister," Ariane whispered. "Did he just call him uncle?" Veronica bit her lip. "Ariane, I'm asking a serious question." "Ariane, because if he did..." "Ariane, then this is the funniest thing I've heard all week." Veronica finally lost the battle. A laugh escaped. A small one. But enough. David heard it. His eye twitched. Julian looked confused. "What happened?" "Nothing." Veronica answered immediately. "Absolutely nothing." Ariane turned away. Her shoulders were shaking. Julian looked at David, then at Veronica, then at Ariane. He had the distinct feeling he was missing something. Several minutes later, David finally escaped the conversation. The moment he left, Ariane collapsed into a nearby chair. "I can't believe he actually has to call him uncle." "Ariane, imagine if you married Julian." "Ariane, he'd have to call you Aunt Veronica." Veronica nearly choked. Across from them, Julian paused. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely surprised. "Aunt Veronica." The phrase echoed in his mind. Then, despite himself, Julian laughed. A real laugh. The sound immediately caught Veronica's attention. And for some reason, she found herself smiling again. Meanwhile, David looked back from across the ballroom, only to see Veronica smiling at Julian, and Julian smiling back. For the first time in years, a strange feeling appeared in his chest. Not annoyance, not curiosity, something far more unpleasant. Jealousy. And he hated it. The gala finally ended close to midnight. Veronica had never been happier to see her bed. The moment she arrived home, she collapsed face first onto her mattress. "I survived." Ariane appeared in the doorway. "Barely." Veronica pointed toward the door. "Leave." "No." "Ariane, you smiled at him." Veronica sat up immediately. "I did not." "You did." "I did not." "You did." Veronica groaned and buried her face in a pillow. Ariane laughed. The next morning, Veronica was rudely awakened by her phone. She stared at the screen, then immediately regretted it. Emma Carter. Calling. Veronica answered. "What?" "You met Julian Valentine." Veronica nearly fell off the bed. "What?" "I said you met Julian Valentine." "How do you know that?" Emma gasped dramatically. Veronica. Beth. A pause. Then. You underestimated my power. Veronica already had a headache. Emma Carter had been her best friend for years. Unfortunately, Emma treated gossip like a professional sport. If information existed anywhere within a 50-kilometer radius, Emma would find it. Meet me, Emma announced. Now. An hour later, Veronica found herself sitting inside a cafe. Emma immediately leaned across the table. No. Veronica sighed. Emma grinned. He looked at you. Many people looked at me. He smiled. Many people smiled. He talked to you. Emma. He laughed. Emma. Emma pointed dramatically. He's interested. Veronica took a sip of coffee. No. You're in denial. No. You're absolutely in denial. Before Veronica could argue further, another person slid into the empty seat. A tall young man with black hair and gray eyes. Noah Bennett. Family friend. Professional troublemaker. And Julius's best friend. Interesting. Noah grabbed a menu. Very interesting. Veronica closed her eyes. Not him too. What exactly is interesting? Noah looked confused. Emma talking about your future husband. Veronica nearly inhaled her coffee. Across the city, David Smith was having a much worse morning. Because Chloe Hart had arrived. Uninvited. Again. David. Chloe crossed her arms. Everyone is talking. David frowned. Talking about what? You. That immediately got his attention. Chloe sat down. People are saying Veronica ignored you. David's expression darkened. I don't care. Chloe rolled her eyes. Sure. Unfortunately, he did care. Much more than he wanted to admit. Especially after remembering Veronica laughing with Julian. The memory annoyed him. Across the office, another man watched the interaction. Ethan Brooks, one of David's colleagues, and possibly the only reasonable person in the building. Ethan looked up from his laptop. You should move on. David frowned. What? Ethan shrugged. You broke up with her. I didn't break up with her. Not yet. Ethan corrected. But you were planning to. David fell silent. And somehow, that made Ethan's point worse. Meanwhile, at Valentine Group headquarters, Sophia Reed entered Julian's office carrying several documents. The assistant stopped, then blinked. Julian was smiling. Sophia immediately became suspicious, because Julian rarely smiled at work. Sir. Julian looked up. Yes. Sophia narrowed her eyes. Who is she? Julian nearly choked. For the first time in years. Sophia smiled. Got him. Interesting. Very interesting. Perhaps work was about to become much more entertaining. A few days later, Veronica found herself having lunch with Eliza Smith. The older woman had invited her out after learning she was free. Unfortunately, Veronica had made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Because the moment lunch arrived, she remembered something. Something important. Something that had been bothering her since the gala. Mrs. Smith. Eliza smiled. You can call me Aunt Eliza, dear. Veronica nodded. Aunt Eliza. Yes. Veronica hesitated, then finally asked, Why does David call Julian uncle? Eliza blinked, then laughed. A lot. Veronica immediately became embarrassed. Was that a stupid question? No. Eliza wiped a tear from her eye. It's just that everyone asks eventually. Veronica relaxed. Good. She wasn't alone. Eliza took a sip of tea. All right. Let me explain. Veronica immediately paid attention. Because this family tree had been haunting her. You know my maiden name is Valentine. Veronica nodded. My father was Richard Valentine. Another nod. Now here's where people get confused. Eliza smiled. My father was much older than Helion. Veronica blinked. Oh, very much older. Eliza laughed. There was a large age gap between them. How large? Over 20 years. Veronica nearly dropped her fork. 20 years. Yes. Suddenly everything made more sense. Eliza continued. My father had me fairly late. Okay. And then many years later, my grandfather and grandmother had Helion. Veronica stared. Oh. Eliza laughed again. Now she understood. Technically, Richard Valentine and Heli and Valentine were brothers, even though their ages were closer to uncle and nephew, which meant Helion was still part of the older generation, and Julian was Helion's son. Veronica pointed dramatically. So Julian is technically David's uncle because he's the son of David's grandfather's brother? Exactly. Veronica stared into the distance, her soul leaving her body. Slowly, painfully, I finally understand. Good. Unfortunately, Eliza became suspicious. What unfortunately? Veronica covered her face. The family gatherings must be ridiculous. Eliza immediately burst out laughing. They absolutely are. Veronica felt validated. David hates explaining it, doesn't he? Eliza's smile widened. He does. He really does. He really does. Veronica nearly laughed. Eliza leaned back in her chair. The funniest part is that Julian is only a few years older than David. Exactly. Veronica pointed again. That's why I was confused. So was everyone else when they were younger. Eliza smiled fondly. When David was little, he used to argue about it. Veronica's eyes widened. He argued. Constantly. What happened? Eliza immediately adopted a child's voice. He's not my uncle. He's too young. Veronica lost the battle. A laugh escaped. Eliza continued. And then my father would explain the family tree. Did it work? No. Veronica laughed harder. David kept insisting that family trees should make more sense. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't. The two women shared a smile. Then Eliza casually added, Of course, if you married Julian one day, things would become even funnier. Veronica immediately choked. What? Eliza looked completely innocent. I was simply making an observation. Veronica could feel her face heating up. Meanwhile, several tables away, a familiar blonde-haired businessman had just entered the restaurant. And unfortunately for Veronica, Julian Valentine had heard the last sentence. Julian paused. For perhaps the first time in his professional career, he had no idea how to respond. Meanwhile, Veronica wished the floor would open and swallow her whole. Immediately, preferably before Julian walked over. Unfortunately, the universe hated her. Good afternoon. Julian's voice sounded far too calm. Veronica slowly looked up. Good afternoon. Wonderful. Fantastic. She was never recovering from this. Eliza looked between them, then smiled. A smile that worried Veronica. A lot. I'll leave you two to talk. Traitor. Absolute traitor. Before Veronica could protest, Eliza stood and left. Just like that, leaving Veronica alone with Julian. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then Julian spoke. My mother called me this morning. Veronica immediately became suspicious. Why? Julian looked amused. Apparently she likes you. Veronica blinked. She's met me once. That was enough. Veronica stared. Was the entire Valentine family like this? Because that explained a lot. A few weeks passed. Then another. And another. Life slowly settled into a routine. Julian occasionally called. Sometimes they met for coffee. Sometimes lunch. Sometimes family gatherings brought them together. The strange thing was that Julian never pushed. Never pressured. Never played games. He simply showed up. Consistently. And somehow, that made Veronica trust him. By the 3rd month, even Emma had stopped pretending. You like him? No. You absolutely do. No. Emma sighed. Veronica. What? You smile when he texts. Veronica froze. Emma pointed dramatically. See. Traitor. Across town. David's life was not going nearly as well. Because every family gathering had become torture. Veronica and Julian kept appearing together. Not dating. Not officially. But together. David hated it. Especially because Julian looked genuinely happy around her. And Veronica looked happy too. One evening, David finally snapped. Why him? Veronica blinked. What? Why are you spending so much time with him? For a moment, Veronica simply stared. Then she remembered. The original Veronica would have been thrilled to hear those words. The old Veronica would have waited years for David to notice her. The new Veronica merely shrugged. Because I enjoy his company. Simple. Honest. Devastating. David looked as though someone had punched him. Good. Months later, the annual Van Beth charity event arrived. By then, everyone had noticed. The Valentines, the Smiths, the Van Beths, even random reporters. Veronica and Julian spent almost every event together. The rumors were unstoppable. And for once, the rumors were correct. That evening, Julian found Veronica standing alone on a balcony. The city lights sparkled below. For a moment neither spoke. Then Julian exhaled softly. "I have a question." Veronica immediately became nervous. "Oh." Julian smiled. "Would you like to have dinner with me this Friday?" Veronica stared. "Wait. Just dinner. Not a merger. Not a business meeting. Not a family event. An actual date. A real one." The realization made her heart skip. Julian patiently waited. Then, for the first time since arriving in this world, Veronica made a decision without consulting the plot, without worrying about the future, without comparing herself to the original story. She smiled, a genuine smile. "I'd love to." Julian's answering smile was worth every embarrassing moment she'd suffered. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, David watched everything. The smile, the conversation, the way Julian looked at Veronica, the way Veronica looked back. And for the first time, he finally understood. She wasn't playing hard to get. She wasn't trying to make him jealous. She wasn't waiting for him. Veronica had truly moved on. The realization hurt far more than he expected. A few months later, the news shocked everyone. Julian Valentine and Veronica Van Beth were officially dating. Ariane celebrated. Emma celebrated. Noah celebrated. Violetta nearly cried from happiness. Helion immediately started planning family vacations. Julia spent 3 weeks investigating Julian anyway. David suffered, exactly as nature intended. And 1 year later, Julian proposed. Veronica said yes, without hesitation, without regret, without looking back. For the first time in both her lives, she was genuinely happy. And at the engagement dinner, Lillian accidentally delivered the final blow. The entire table had been discussing wedding plans. Everything was peaceful, until Lillian smiled, looked directly at Veronica, and said, "You know." Everyone immediately became suspicious. "What?" Veronica asked. Lillian's smile widened. "I've been practicing." Veronica had a bad feeling. A very bad feeling. Then Lillian cheerfully announced, "Good evening," and Veronica. Silence. Complete silence. Ariane collapsed into laughter. Emma nearly fell out of her chair. Noah hit the table. Even Helion looked amused. Across the room, David closed his eyes. His suffering was eternal. And beside him, Julian laughed. Veronica laughed. The entire family laughed. Only David remained silent. Because after all these years, after all his mistakes, after all his bad decisions, the woman he had once taken for granted was now technically his aunt. And somehow, that felt like the universe's favorite joke. Veronica personally thought it was hilarious. The wedding took place in early spring. The weather was perfect. The flowers were perfect. The venue was perfect. And according to Julius, everything was suspicious. "No wedding is this perfect." Noah sighed. "You say that every hour." "Because I'm right." "You investigated the florist." "They were suspicious. They arranged flowers. They arranged them suspiciously." Noah walked away. Some battles were impossible to win. Meanwhile, inside the bridal suite, Veronica stared at her reflection. For a moment, everything felt unreal. A year and a half ago, she had fallen asleep as an exhausted office worker. Now she was standing in a wedding dress, preparing to marry Julian Valentine. Life was strange. Very strange. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Ariane entered first, followed by Valeria. Then Emma. The room immediately became emotional, which was unfortunate, because Veronica had specifically told everyone not to cry. Valeria ignored that request completely. "My daughter is getting married." Veronica immediately pointed. "No crying." Valeria cried anyway. Ariane joined her. Emma wasn't far behind. Veronica looked toward the ceiling. This was a disaster. An emotional disaster. Eventually, the ceremony began. Guests filled the seats. The Smiths, the Valentines, the Van Beths, friends, business partners, family. Everyone had gathered to celebrate. Julian stood at the altar. And for perhaps the first time in his life, he looked nervous. Noah immediately noticed. This information would be used against him forever. Then the music started. The doors opened, and Veronica appeared. For a brief moment, the entire room fell silent. Julian couldn't look away. Neither could anyone else. She looked beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. But more importantly, she looked happy. Genuinely happy. And that was something Julian never wanted to change. The ceremony itself was simple, heartfelt, sincere, perfect. When they exchanged rings, Arian cried again. When they exchanged vows, Valeria cried harder. When they kissed, Emma nearly screamed. Julius had to physically stop Noah from recording everyone's reactions. The reception afterward was even more chaotic, especially when Lillian grabbed a microphone. Oh no! David immediately knew trouble was coming. Lillian smiled. I'd like to congratulate my new Aunt Veronica. The room exploded into laughter. Veronica buried her face in Julian's shoulder. Julian was laughing too hard to help. Across the room, David accepted his fate. There was no escaping this. Not anymore. Several months later, life settled down. Veronica and Julian moved into their new home. Ariane remained Ariane. Julius remained overprotective. Noah remained annoying. Nothing changed. And somehow, that made everything better. As for David, life surprised him. Again. Because one afternoon, he found himself sitting across from Chloe Hart. The same Chloe who had spent years admiring him. The same Chloe who never gave up. The same Chloe he had never truly paid attention to. Until recently. You've been staring at your coffee for 10 minutes. Chloe informed him. David blinked. Have I? Yes. Sorry. Chloe laughed. A genuine laugh. Not forced. Not calculated. Just honest. And for the first time, David found himself smiling back. The following year, the engagement announcement shocked absolutely nobody. Especially not Lillian. Finally. Chloe looked offended. What do you mean finally? It took him long enough. David sighed. Some things never changed. At the engagement dinner, Veronica and Julian attended together. As family, as husband and wife, as the people who had gotten their happy ending. Chloe looked radiant. David looked happier than he had in years. And for the first time, Veronica realized something. She wasn't angry anymore. Not at David. Not at the original story. Not at the life she'd left behind. Because everything had worked out exactly as it was supposed to. Very dangerous. Even the mistakes. Even the heartbreak. Even the ridiculous family tree. Especially the ridiculous family tree. As the evening continued, Lillian raised her glass. Everyone became suspicious immediately. I'd like to make a toast. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Lillian smiled. To Julian. Julian narrowed his eyes. To Veronica. Veronica became suspicious too. And to David. David relaxed. Then Lillian continued, for finally accepting that Aunt Veronica was never coming back. The room erupted. Again. David groaned. Chloe laughed. Julian laughed. Veronica laughed. Even David eventually laughed. Because honestly, at that point, the joke was too funny not to. And surrounded by family, friends, and the people they loved most, everyone finally got their happy ending.